This video will help you understand the 5 challenges of post-Christian culture. It'll also help you be a more confident and effective follower of Jesus. It'll give you more boldness and will help you lead your family in a confused culture. Hey everyone, Jonathan Morrow here, where I give you training and tools to understand culture and live out a biblical worldview. Now be sure to stay around to the end of the video because I'm going to bring all this together and make it really clear and actionable for you. I'm also going to give you something that's going to help you apply this right where you're at for you personally and for your family. So you're not going to want to miss that. Now, once I show you these things, you're going to see them everywhere, which is part of our responsibilities as followers of Christ, is to understand culture and to live that out every day. So let's dive right in. Here are the 5 challenges of post-Christian culture. Let's get started. So before we dive into the 5 challenges of post-Christian culture, we first have to understand what is culture. And that's a very important definition for us to start with, because if we're going to understand what is going on around us and then how we need to live out our faith in light of that, we have to define our terms. Culture is what you come to see as normal without having to think about it. And good things can be seen as normal and bad things can be seen as normal. The problem is it just seems normal, right? And if we don't reflect, if we don't think, if we don't pause, then we just see everything around us become normalized, whether that's good or bad, and we just step into it, we walk into it. Like the people on this escalator, we just get going and we're moving and we don't even realize it. So culture is what you come to see as normal without having to think about it. So what is being normalized in today's secular, post-Christian, even anti-Christian culture? What's being seen as normal, especially around the next generation? All right, so what I want to do is start with one of my favorite quotes by Francis Schaeffer. He says this: "The Christian must resist the spirit of the world in the form that it takes in his own generation." And every generation of Christ followers lives at the intersection of faith and culture. The greats of the faith, everyone from Augustine to C.S. Lewis to Martin Luther to John Calvin to Corrie ten Boom, Frederick Douglass, C.S. Lewis, Francis Schaeffer, you name it, they've had their challenges and they've had their opportunities. And we don't get to pick which ones those are in God's providence. According to Acts 17, we're born according to the providence of God in which cultural situation we find ourselves in. Our responsibility as followers of Jesus is faithfulness. We are called to be faithful in whatever situation we find ourselves in. Okay? So what are those challenges facing us, shaping us in dramatic ways in this generation, especially the next generation of students and our kids growing up in this culture? What is being normalized? Okay? And that's what I want to talk about here. So this passage of scripture helps inform how we think about this. Think about these challenges as waves that come in, and this is just thoroughly biblical language. Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves, and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. And ideas are one of the main ways the enemy likes to deceive individuals, families, and cultures, okay? And in order to not be tossed about by every wind of strange teaching and false teaching, because our culture is lying to us in so many ways right now, we have to understand the nature of these waves that are coming in. The first thing we need to understand, though, is the background and the context in which this post-Christian culture is operating, right? And post-Christian just means after Christian or without regards to or reference to Christian. So it kind of wants all of the great things that Christianity gave us, like human dignity, things like that, without the Christianity part, without the biblical authority part, without the God in the picture part, right? That's what a post-Christian culture wants. But we need to first understand that the backdrop of everything going on right now in our culture is digital saturation and distraction. We live in an unprecedented time of digital saturation, right? Think about a sponge. When a sponge is full, there's nothing else you can put into it. You have to squeeze it out first. And many of us, especially students and kids today, are just full and saturated by screens, right? As my friend David Kinnaman likes to say, screens disciple, and they're discipling all the time. They're saturated. There's nothing else to go in. We can't pause long enough to think. Everything is trivialized. We have so much that's bombarding us every day that we have to figure out how to pause that. But that's the background of what's going on in our culture, is we have digital saturation and distraction, right? The iPhone was invented in 2007. Facebook in 2004, social media, all those things have only grown and shaped these generations, our culture, in so many profound ways that if we're going to understand the major ideas and challenges of post-Christian culture and then how to follow Jesus in light of that, we have to recognize and address digital saturation and distraction. And that's not the goal of this video, but look for another video on that where we're going to tackle digital saturation and distraction, social media, technology, things like that. All right. And so we have to understand that that is the backdrop that's operating. We are being shaped. We are consuming tons of media that is literally rewriting the script for us in terms of what's normalized around reality. So we're distracted and we're seeing things normalized. So what is being normalized? What are the 5 challenges now that we know the backdrop of digital saturation? First, we see this is scientism. Scientism. Now this is a big word, but these are like the undercurrents. Scientism simply means this: science is the only, or at least the best way we can know things. Knowledge is found in the hard sciences, meaning if it's not found in biology and genetics and chemistry, things like that, then it can't be known. What's the problem? Well, if the Bible, which has a lot of claims about morality and history and spirituality, and if those aren't seen as knowledge, then we're not going to have confidence in living those things out. People will no longer be pursuing those things. They won't think that you can have knowledge about big questions of life around morality, spirituality, and history. And the Bible deals with those. Okay, so in the background, you have this assumption that science is king and spiritual morality and historical questions are just opinions, they're just preferences, and you can't know truth about reality. Okay, so that's the first big thing underneath the surface. The first big challenge is what's called scientism. Scientism. And that leads us into the second thing, relativism. The second challenge is relativism. And here's the issue. This is true for you, but not for me. We don't want to be a judgmental society. You live your truth. You do you. That is the mindset of relativism. And it's operating in the background. So once you remove knowledge from the equation about morality, spirituality, and history, now it's just a true for you, but not for me default setting where most people are just relativists when it comes to how they approach questions of morality, spirituality, and history. What's going on in culture that's very distracted, right? Digital saturation and distraction. Scientism, only the hard sciences give us knowledge. And that leads us to relativism, in which we see it's a true for you but not for me mentality. And therefore we don't have knowledge authorizing us to act. That's the second big challenge. Christianity actually claims to be true. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. God's desire is that all people would come to know the truth. That's 1 Timothy 2. So there's plenty of passages which speak of objective truth and how important that is. And when we've already lost knowledge, and knowledge, by the way, authorizes us to act in the real world, knowledge and faith are important. Faith is just active trust in what you have good reason to believe is true. But faith, there's about 400 to 500 faith words in the Bible, believing type words, and about 2,000 plus knowledge or knowing type words in the Bible. Both are vital. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. But knowledge is what gives us confidence to act, right? We build our lives on what we think we can know. We're a distracted culture, a trivialized culture. In the background, we also see the hard sciences as the only authoritative source of truth. And then we default to a true for you, but not for me mentality. And that's what's going on in terms of relativism. And then that leads to tribalism. And what we have here is the reality that we no longer have knowledge of truth. We no longer have the ability to talk about truth or pursue truth. So we are now resorting to power and alliances. And it's an us versus them mentality. We see this in politics. We see this all over social media. We no longer see people trying to persuade one another of the truth. We see people assuming a position and then saying, if you're on board with me, great. If not, you're going to get run over, so I'd get out of the way. So tribalism is a us versus them mentality in which people have already taken sides, and we see this about alliances. Now, there's probably not a clearer example of an alliance than the acronym LGBTQ+, okay? Have you ever wondered where that acronym came from? Because what's going on there is the reality that the L and the T are fundamentally at odds, right? A lesbian assumes a biological woman is a category that can be attracted to another biological woman. A trans individual does not accept biological reality. L and T are actually at odds. They're fundamentally opposed. But for the purposes of overthrowing traditional or the nuclear family structures and people who hold those views, there's been an alliance of LGBTQ+, which is trying to unify, not because those ideas are all coherent, but because their alliance will give them power to overthrow the current structure as it stands, us versus them. That's tribalism, okay? We also see tribalism with kind of secularized versions of social justice and all of those kinds of things. That's what's happening when tribalism is involved. When you've lost truth, you've lost morality, you've lost history, it's a true for you but not for me kind of mood that's going on in the culture, operating in the background, and then kind of a live your truth, you do you, and then all the power is now in an us versus them dynamic. It's alliances, even alliances that don't make sense logically for a time that are useful. And you are currently seeing that battle play itself out between the L and the T in that acronym. And eventually they will have to solve that one on its own. But tribalism is the way people are operating today, not persuasion. And you need to understand that about post-Christian culture. Which that leads us to our fourth challenge of post-Christian culture, which is the sexual revolution 2.0. The sexual revolution 2.0. Now, the sexual revolution happened in the 1960s, in which pretty much any behavior, any sexual behavior that anybody wanted to do was to be okay. People should be able to do whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do it, all right? Now, fast forward with all these ideas that have now come to fruition, we see the sexual revolution 2.0, in which you now have a situation where not just sexual behavior is normalized, you now have sexual identity in that people can be at an identity level whoever they want to be sexually. So you lose categories of male, female, gender go out the window, marriage, all of those kinds of things. Traditional relationships rooted in biological reality, those are out the window in terms of the sexual revolution 2.0, because now we see sexual identity being able to be defined according to how people feel or what their desires are. And we see that operating in the background as well. And this is clearly talked about. Carl Trueman in his book talks about expressive individualism, where people's desires are what determines truth. And you see that talked about and lived out in today's culture. That's the sexual revolution 2.0. And again, there's a lot more we could say about a lot of these, but I want you to see the power of all these five forces shaping one another, operating at the same time, especially in the next generation that's consuming and scrolling endlessly on phones and devices as we all are. And we're just being shaped, right? Because culture is what you come to see as normal without having to think about it. And then that leads us to the fifth challenge of post-Christian culture, which is this: progressive Christianity. So if you took a version of Christianity, and I'm going to put that in quotes because it's not really Christian, that basically denies historical knowledge, moral knowledge, spiritual knowledge, that kind of adopts this live your truth mindset or mentality, kind of speaking that into reality, that assumes the tribalism, that it's LGBTQ plus affirming, that it denies biological reality, it denies Jesus is the only way, it embraces the sexual revolution 2.0, and it calls itself progressive and Christian. That's progressive Christianity. Now, that's not always going to show up on the doctrinal statement of a church, but there's this growing mood among younger Christians and millennials especially that have kind of deconstructed from their faith. They've kind of become disillusioned with Christianity in some ways, but rather than anchoring in what's true, they've adopted and normalized in many ways what our broader culture has in these key areas. And so that's what's so, in many ways, dangerous about progressive Christianity. So imagine this: if I drew a circle, right, and at the core of it is what Christianity is. And at the core of that is the gospel, the truth that Jesus lived, was a real person, he died, he was raised again for the forgiveness of our sins. He is the only way to God. It's the only way to find forgiveness. Well, if you lose that motivation, you have to have some sort of animating force. Well, if you remove the gospel and the exclusive claims of Jesus from the core of Christianity, like progressive Christianity has done, you have to put something else in there to animate the movement, and that's secular social justice, right? LGBTQ plus affirming, that's where your critical theories are going to come in, the latest versions of secular social justice, and those pursuits become the animating force of progressive Christianity, not the exclusive claim that Jesus is the only way to God. He's the only one that offers us forgiveness and hope and restoration and eternal life that can set us free from the guilt and the shame that we are wrestling with. We're all of sin and fallen short of the glory of God, right? So that's a vast difference between what's going on in progressive Christianity and historic Christianity, okay? So those are the 5 challenges. Scientism, we've lost knowledge other than the hard sciences. Relativism says you do you, speak your truth, live your truth, don't judge anybody, right? Freedom is getting to do whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it. And if you lose truth and knowledge, you end up with tribalism and us versus them mentality, in which basically you define your us, you define your them, you form an alliance. You no longer seek to persuade, you seek to impose. That's what happens. In tribalism, then you have the sexual revolution 2.0, where sexual behavior is not just what people are after to be able to do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. They want to define their own identity however they feel, however they desire, and however they think that should be. And that's kind of a moving target. There's no objective to a reality to that anymore. And then if you took a movement that was broadly Christian, quote unquote, at least uses some of the same terminology, but adopts all of these kind of things into it, you end up with progressive Christianity. And that's the environment in which we are trying to follow Jesus, in which you are trying to raise a family, moms and dads trying to raise your kids, students that you're trying to live out your faith. These are the things that are operating in the background. And as Francis Schaeffer said, we don't get to pick these. These are just what's here. Now, as a parent, you may be wondering, okay, well, what in the world then do I do with all this? And that's where I want to help you with a very specific tool that I have created. It's actually a course called 5 Things Every Teenager Needs to Build a Lasting Faith. These are the 5 things that we can control, that we can influence as parents, right? Look, God's going to do what God's going to do. We have no control over that. And our kids, as much as we would love to believe differently, are going to make the choices that they are going to make. So what are the 5 things that can help them build a lasting faith? That's what I talk about in this course. I'll walk you step by step through what's going on in here. We'll talk about what you can begin doing. What are the things that make a difference? I will help you develop a faith ownership dashboard for them. I will help give you a practical and actionable plan to give your kids a lasting faith. 5 things every teenager needs to build a lasting faith. I also want to give you a discount code on that because you're watching this on YouTube. Definitely help me out. Like the video and subscribe. That always helps me out. Leave comments about what's helpful to you. But when you go to this link, go to jonathanmorrow.org and you'll click on resources there. This 5 things every teenager needs to build a lasting faith course, and enter the code TRUTH. Enter the code TRUTH, and that will give you a discount on this course so that you can get that right away and start putting some of these things into practice. So again, use the special discount code TRUTH for 10% off on this course. Let me just wrap up by telling you again why this is so important and what's so valuable about understanding. Before we can step into meaningful action, we have to understand the direction in which we're going. What does faithfulness look like? Well, it means that we need to understand that there's knowledge, right? We can know it. Truth is not relative. It's objective. It's either true or false, and you can know that. Tribalism is the way everyone's being shaped right now. Our kids are growing up in this us versus them mentality. We've got to offer them a better way. We've got to share the goodness of biological reality of male and female as God's good design. And we must resist the urge to reshape the church to look like the culture, which is what progressive Christianity has done. And we also need to recognize that digital saturation and distraction are affecting all of us. So we've got to figure out ways to pause, get control, and lead our families in this direction. Again, more coming soon on that, so stay tuned on that topic as well. Here's what we need to do. This is the generation that the Lord has called us to. He has invited us to faithfulness. So, in light of the challenges of post-Christian culture, what can we do to live out our faith with confidence and with boldness and with understanding? It's going to require us first to understand how people are being shaped and be waking up long enough to go, oh, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. We've got to create a new normal. Now, I've only been able to scratch the surface on going into detail on these 5 cultural challenges, as well as what do we do about them and how do we engage, how do we build a biblical worldview. I want to make sure that you know about some of these books that I've published to help you with this, to make this really clear. Welcome to College, Questioning the Bible, Is God Just Human Invention, and Think Christianly. There's great resources for you to go deeper on any of these topics around both understanding culture and living out a biblical worldview. It also helps me out if you can subscribe to this channel and like it and share it. Leave a comment. Tell me the kinds of videos you want. Tell me the kind of challenges you're facing about how to apply biblical worldview to what you are facing in day-to-day life. So be sure to do that for me. That would help me out a ton. So those are the 5 challenges of post-Christian culture. We need to be able to understand them so that we can more confidently engage them. So I'll see you in the next video.